Whenever you're ready, we'll go for a little test here.
Okay.
So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Judy Ashby. I'm at McQueen High School in Reno, Nevada, and I just taught an Algebra 1 lesson on exponentials.
Okay, so starting out, we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. First question, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
Today's lesson was the introduction to exponential growth and decay. The last few weeks we've been just working on simplifying exponents, simplifying radicals, kind of more of the basic level, and now we're ready to apply those skills to understanding where the root of the function is and kind of looking back to the parent function of exponentials and using that and applying it in some real world context and then in our algebraic world as well.
Good, you're doing good.
Is that okay?
Okay. So,
Straighter?
Yeah.
Should I lean back or is it?
Whatever's comfortable,
Okay.
just try to, it just looks better.
Okay.
Like a model. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so second question, sorry. Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
Okay, can I look at my
Yeah.
stuff real quick here for this?
So whenever you're ready, go for it.
The standards that we are addressing all sort of dance around exponential growth and decay, the exponential family in general. Because it was the introductory day, we sort of delved into 3 or 4 different pieces of the standards. So we just touched on the idea of having a graph and writing the exponential function from it. We touched on having a table and writing an exponential function from that. Let's see, dang it, now I messed it up. Does that mean I have to start all over again?
You want to start over?
Should I start again or just keep going from there? Can I jump back in?
I would say, why don't you start it off?
Okay. I guess that kind of does it. So many different pieces of the function, of the standards is what the problem is. Interpreting the graph is what I really wanted to add in there. Okay, whenever I'm ready.
Okay.
Today was, because it was the introduction to exponentials, we touched on several different standards and just kind of pulled pieces out of each of those. So I wanted students to be able to look at a table and write an exponential function from that, just a basic idea of it. I wanted them to look at a graph and be able to recognize it as an exponential function and then to write a function from that. I want them to interpret the graph and understand what it is the graph is telling them, to be able to read it and the table and all the different pieces and recognize it as an appropriate exponential family of functions.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified, and how do you plan for this?
Okay, hold on.
Do you want some water? I know you've been running around.
I know, right? I'm okay.
Are you sure?
Do I sound funny?
No.
Do I need water?
I
Am I
mean,
okay?
I know when you've been running around all day.
Talking for 5 hours.
Right.
Okay, core action.
Okay, so let's do, which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified, and how did you plan for this?
Well, I definitely think that of the core action indicators that the students were really able to relate to some prior knowledge. So I wanted to prepare them with, for example, the initial warm-up question was a linear function. So I wanted to remind them about how we can interpret from a table or a graph what kind of function we're looking at. We touched on some of our basic simplifying of exponents in the last few weeks and used all those to apply into our lesson. Okay. Let me do one more piece for that one. Okay. Additionally, I would say some of the core action indicators that we addressed I tried to do some really high quality questioning, some deeper level questioning for them, to help them not just necessarily to be looking at the surface of what was happening, but to see deeper into the topic and how the topic is relating into things happening in their lives all around them.
We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your classroom. First question, discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Okay, pause one more time. I really don't think I'll have to stop after this. As far as the shifts go, I think that the lesson really addressed all of them in different pieces. We're really focusing in on the specific exponential standards, so that's picking up a lot of the focus. The coherence within just this unit in itself, linking the previous unit, simplifying exponents to what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks, in addition to sort of bringing together the families of functions that we've started to look at and will continue to address throughout the rest of the year. Can I pause there and do the next piece, or is it not a good one to pause on? Okay. The third shift, rigor, I think the students really pick up each of those pieces throughout. I try not to give them, I did my best not to just give them the answer. We were short on time by the end, so there were pieces at the end that I really wanted them to do a little bit more discovering, but I tried the best I could to give them time to think through and to really figure out what was happening and try to use their prior knowledge to make a decision about what kind of function there might be and how to write it, to just apply any bits of knowledge that they had to creating this function. Is that okay? Is that good?
Yeah, no, you're fine. Just making sure you're finished.
Thanks.
Second question is, how did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
Well, before Common Core, we didn't even teach exponentials in Algebra 1. That was all saved for Algebra 2. And so we really just did the basic level, simplifying exponents, simplifying radicals, simplifying pieces and pieces. And so students didn't really have a lot of time to understand why they were doing these things. So I love that now we're able to add this piece in and give them some application. Even when we were doing it in Algebra 2, we've just in the last couple of years with Common Core sort of developed the idea that we need to teach it from a parent function perspective, that every one of these different families have the same patterns and the same consistencies. And so that by itself has, I think, developed understanding at a much higher degree, at a much deeper level than it did previously. But even better than that, now to be able to go one step further and apply each of these families to some real life content, like the penny idea, or talking about where we see exponential growth and decay in life, and thinking about how that graph really is represented with those real life things.
Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensure that all students have the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. First question, how did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson, and how do you know?
I taught this lesson to freshmen today, and so they are just generally, they're a little bit less mature when it comes to these sorts of activities. And I thought with that in mind that they did great. I think that they really enjoy something hands-on, something that they can relate to. And I bet you want to start again.
Wouldn't it be funny if it printed like 50 pages, so you turn it off?
Yeah. See, somebody's gonna come in and get it.
I know, right? Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
How did students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics?
So I would say that, especially being that I was teaching this to a class of freshmen who generally are a little bit immature and can be a little squirrely, I think that they did great. I think they really enjoyed the lesson. I think they liked having some hands-on application, and they liked being able to see where some of the math that they're doing really does relate to their outside world. And in the next couple of weeks, when we are continuing to do it, maybe from sometimes a more algebraic side, we can continue to address this lesson and come back to it and talk about it and spark a little bit of energy for them in what we're doing it for.
Explain how you differentiated in this lesson. Did all students have the opportunity to work on grade level content? If all students did not have the opportunity, explain why.
I would say that every student had the opportunity in this lesson to work on grade level content. Certainly everything we did addressed the standards. I would say that some students were able to more quickly grasp the concepts that I was pushing, and those students probably had a little more thinking time, if anything else, more time to come up with places they've seen exponential growth and decay. Once they had the function in the warm-up, for example, they had more time to think about different ways to have reached that conclusion. Whereas there were some other students that really wanted to be walked through it. And they held off as long as they could, and they picked out pieces that they could understand, but it really probably wasn't until the students near them gave them some hints, or they started talking through it, that maybe then that sparked enough that they were able to reach the level that I was going for. So I would say that by the end, everybody got there, but definitely at different paces. And I liked that in their groups, they had the opportunity sort of to differentiate between them. Those that were doing well and grasping it more quickly could support the students that were having a harder time. And likewise, by walking around and sort of pointing things out here and there, I hoped to lead some of those students that were struggling in the right direction more quickly.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? And what actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Hey, pause. Within Core Action 3, I believe that probably the one that, the indicator that within Core Action 3, the indicator that I believe students probably dealt with the most within this lesson was the one where they needed to connect they needed to speak really, goodness sakes, like I've never talked before. Informal language to precise mathematical language. Within Core Action 3, I believe that one indicator that students had time to develop was to convert their language into mathematical language. I really try on a day-to-day basis as students are answering questions or discussing within pairs to remind them to use proper mathematical language. So they sound like mathematicians, I tell them. So we said growth factor, we talked about a first difference, and as I say these things, I remind them this means remember the change when we're subtracting the y's. This is the first difference. This is the constant difference. We try to use mathematical words as much as possible, and I feel like that makes a really big difference in conversations within the class, in responses on tests. I can see students grasping things as I speak more quickly because we are in a habit of using that mathematical discourse.
Did you look through the submitted work a little bit?
Yes.
Would you like to comment on any of the would you like to comment on any of the students' work today in class?
Sure.
Anything that you saw surprising when you were walking around the tables or when they were doing the work with the pennies and graphing.
Let's see. Okay. As the students were working and I was walking around, we weren't doing necessarily just a worksheet that everyone could turn in, but just kind of bits and pieces all over the place. And I definitely noticed on a few different papers from students who are generally lower level students, I noticed them writing things down, trying to make notes of things that, they were thinking. You could tell that they were thinking. Not all of them could get all the way to the end, but I was excited to see that, I think partially because the lesson was enticing to them, they were willing to take a stab at it and try something and guess as to whether it might lead in the right direction.
Great instructors are continuously learning, and we want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
Within this lesson, I loved that all of the students, for the most part, were really engaged and involved, and when I would ask questions directly, students seemed to be well enough on the ball that they could stay with me, and when I asked to the class, the majority of the class was responding to me. That's a good sign to me that they were enjoying themselves and that they were learning. I think as a teacher that we are always working on our time management, and I would have liked to have more time for discussion at the end, more time to let them discover the exponential decay function. I really wanted to give them time to work in groups and try to figure it out, especially after having spent all that time on the warm-up writing one. I was hoping that they would be able to do the same at the end. And when it came down to it, I only had a few minutes left, and I prioritized concluding the lesson so that they would have something to mull about over the next day until I see them tomorrow. So I moved a little bit more quickly than I would have liked. So I guess in the future, I would want to cut something out somewhere to try to leave a little bit more time for that really important mathematical discussion.
Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions today?
I would say there weren't any huge surprises. I would say that being that this class is generally a pretty good class, they were on task and seemed pretty interested, and so I was glad about that, but not too surprised, because anytime I bring out manipulatives or find some way to connect their learning to their lives, they seem to be much more enticed.
You're done.
Good?
Good work.